Chris? Leon.
Resident Evil's story may have started out fairly simple and straightforward 2.5 decades ago, but as time has gone on, it's become more and more convoluted. With Resident Evil 6, the series touched never-before-seen heights of ridiculousness and nonsense insanity. Though it tried to raise the stakes higher than ever with a globe-trotting story and 4 separate campaigns focusing on different characters who would often cross paths with each other, it escalated things a bit too much, and the only thing it ended up doing was telling a confusing, muddled tale. Before we begin, please consider subscribing and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon. With that out of the way, let's get started. Either way, over the last few weeks and months, we have been going through the franchise bit by bit as we recount its entire story, and now it's time for Resident Evil 6. So here, we're going to go over its full story, from beginning to end. Buckle up, because this will be a bumpy one. Our story begins in December 2012, in a civil war-torn Eastern European state known as Edonia. Jake Muller is a hardened mercenary despite his young age, and makes his living fighting for Edonian rebels. The status quo quickly shifts, however, when a new medicine starts doing the rounds here. Brought by a mysterious woman who claims that the medicine is a nutritional supplement, it turns out after everyone has taken it that it was actually a bioweapon. Everyone is infected and transformed into monsters, but Jake mysteriously remains unaffected. As everyone around him loses their mind and the situation erupts into chaos, Jake is contacted by a young woman who works as an agent for the United States Department of Security Operations, Sherry Birkin, who was once a young, helpless girl who had to be rescued from Raccoon City years ago by Leon S. Kennedy and Claire Redfield, but has now become a trained agent. Sherry tells Jake that the bioweapon that was released in Edonia is called the C-Virus, released by a bioterrorist group calling itself Neo Umbrella, and that curiously enough, Jake seems to be immune to its effects. And since he carries antibodies, he may be the key to the vaccine. Jake agrees to help Sherry make a vaccine, but being a mercenary, doesn't do so until she agrees to make a hefty cash payment to him when the job is done. Together, Jake and Sherry make their escape, but as they're attempting to flee from Edonia, Neo Umbrella unleashes a deadly, monstrous new bioweapon known as Ustanak, or as series fans like to call him, Mr. Knockoff Nemesis. Ustanak, focused solely on finding and killing Jake, pursues him and Sherry as they make their escape, hellbent on stopping them. During the chase, they cross paths with none other than Chris Redfield, and with their help, manage to get away. How the hell did Chris even get here, though? Well, we'll get to that in just a bit. Jake and Sherry manage to find their way into a helicopter, but Ustanak is nothing if not persistent. Though it's unable to kill them, it does damage the chopper heavily, and though Jake and Sherry narrowly manage to jump out before it crashes, a piece of the chopper breaks off during the chaos, rips their parachute to shreds, and causes them to take a deep tumble. Now, let's pause for a bit. Chris Redfield, how the hell did he end up in Edonia? Well, he's a decorated soldier and an agent of the BSAA, so when the organization gets wind of the bioterrorism attack in Edonia, naturally it's Chris who leads a squad out to Eastern Europe to deal with the situation. Also among his squad is Piers Nivens, an up-and-comer who shows a lot of promise. After helping Jake and Sherry escape from Ustanak, Chris and his squad successfully break into the Neo Umbrella facility close by, where, surprisingly enough, they find everyone's favorite spy and quintuplet agent, Ada Wong. Apparently, she's a prisoner here, held captive by Neo Umbrella. But as Chris and his squad begin the process of extracting her from the facility, it turns out that she was much more than that. She was using herself as bait, and the trap she had laid for the BSAA squad has now been sprung. She infects almost the entire squad with the C-Virus, turning them into monstrous creatures. Chris and Piers are the only ones who survive, and the two are forced to gun down their fellow soldiers. Chris sustains heavy injuries during the chaos, and only narrowly manages to make it out alive thanks to Piers. Let's get one thing out of the way right now. Resident Evil 6 takes its sweet time revealing this stuff, but we're going to talk about it right here to avoid any confusion and, for convenience sake. The Ada Wong Chris and company find here is not the real Ada Wong. She's Carla Radamez, the lead researcher for Neo Umbrella, who secretly works for Derek Simmons, the national security advisor to the United States President Adam Binford. So how exactly did she turn into an Ada Wong clone? Well, simply put, Simmons was obsessed with Ada and forcefully transformed Carla into an Ada clone by injecting her with a blend of Ada's DNA and the C-Virus. Yeah, it makes no sense, but that's RE6 for you. Anyway, we'll get to Simmons later. Following the events in Edonia, Chris goes into a self-imposed amnesiac exile for the next 6 months. And again, we'll get to that in a bit. For now, let's get back to Jake and Sherry. Though Jake managed to escape their crash landing relatively unscathed, Sherry incurred a serious injury. But remember how she was infected with the G virus during the events of Resident Evil 2 all those years ago? A virus that, among many other things, gives the person it infects self-healing abilities? Yeah, well, Sherry still carries that virus inside of her, and thanks to that, the injuries she sustained during the crash landing heal by themselves in no time. The two find little time to rest, however. They're attacked once again by C-virus-infected monsters, while Ustanak also continues to doggedly pursue them. Though they manage to escape narrowly time and again, eventually they are surrounded by Neo Umbrella's forces and caught by Carla Radamez. She informs Jake that he is the illegitimate child of none other than Albert Wesker, which, as it turns out, is how he is immune to the C-virus. Neo Umbrella takes Jake and Sherry captive, taking them to the organization's facility in Lanxiang, China, where the two of them are subject to experiments for the next 6 months. And yes, now we jump forward 6 months to June 2013. But before we get back to Chris and Piers and Jake and Sherry, we need to talk about Leon S. Kennedy, who is another crucial part of RE6's story. Now an agent of the Division of Security Operations, Leon's story in Resident Evil 6 picks up in the American city of Tall Oaks. Here, President Adam Binford plans on making confidential details about the destruction of Raccoon City in 1998 public as he prepares to kickstart his new policies for the global war against bioterrorism. As it turns out, however, his plans never kick into motion. Tall Oaks becomes ground zero for a deadly bioterror attack. The C-virus is unleashed in the university campus where Leon and the president currently are, and nearly everyone there is turned into zombified monstrosities, including the president. Leon sees the mutated president attacking United States Secret Service agent Helena Harper, and reluctantly, he is forced to shoot and kill Binford. Immediately, Helena tells Leon that she is the one who is responsible for this attack, but refuses to unveil any more information. She tells him that she needs to get to the Tall Oaks Cathedral, and once Leon has helped her get there, she will tell him the whole story. Though Leon is obviously mistrustful, he does agree. The pair make their way through Tall Oaks, which, as it turns out, has turned into a modern-day Raccoon City. The whole city has been infected with the C-virus and blanketed in complete chaos. Leon and Helena eventually reach the cathedral and then enter a mysterious lab underneath it, where it is revealed why Helena had brought them there: to find her sister Deborah. As it turns out, Derek Simmons, who we spoke of earlier, had abducted Deborah and was holding her hostage. He forced Helena to work for him, and in turn, used her to engineer the bioterror attacks on Tall Oaks. What's worse, it turns out that Deborah is past saving at this point. Leon and Helena arrive too late, and when they do, Deborah turns into a hideously mutated BOW, and Helena is forced to kill her. During their fight with the mutated Deborah, however, they're also aided by Ada Wong, who also happens to be there on the scene, who is currently on the hunt for the fake Ada clone, aka Carla Radamez, who's being paraded around, which of course does not sit right with the real Ada. Once the fight is done, Helena tells Leon that Simmons used her to infect and assassinate the president. Simmons, as it happens, was the one who engineered Raccoon City's destruction in 1998, and he also has other larger plans in motion that will make that incident look tame in comparison. Meanwhile, Ada informs Leon and Helena that Simmons is also the head of a group known as The Family, who are a massively wealthy shadow organization and have been involved in pulling the strings of global politics for their own gain for years. After this, Ada leaves, since she has her own mission that she's on. Leon and Helena, meanwhile, come in contact with Simmons, who tells them that the blame for the president's death has been placed on the two of them. And though it's he himself who framed them, he tells them that if they turn themselves in, he will help clear their names. The two obviously refuse, and with the help of fellow US agent Ingrid Hannigan, who's also a longtime associate of Leon's, they fake their deaths. Why exactly do they do that? Well, because as it turns out, Simmons has now orchestrated another bioterror attack in Lanxiang, China. Leon and Helena, determined to put a stop to his machinations, head to China, while Tall Oaks is blown to bits by a missile strike behind them, calling back to the destruction of Raccoon City. Now it's time to pause once again and catch up with Chris Redfield. 6 months ago, his team was decimated, and he himself was gravely injured in the incident in Edonia. Since then, Chris has then suffered PTSD-afflicted amnesia. Yeah, he's not doing well, and he doesn't even remember why. Again, RE6 tries to make a big deal out of his amnesia, but like many other plot points in the series, it never really goes anywhere. So why don't we just save ourselves some time here? He eventually recovers his memory, and it only takes a couple of chapters of his story for him to get to that point. Big surprise. Anyway, Chris's story picks back up 6 months after the Edonia incident in Eastern Europe. His memories are currently gone, and he's taken a step back from his BSAA duties, obviously, but he's soon pulled back into the action. His former fellow BSA agent, Piers Nivens, arrives on the scene and informs Chris about what's going on in China. Chris is obviously reluctant to go, but a combination of Piers' insistence and the hope that fighting against bioterrorism in China will bring back his memories leads him to finally relent and agree to leading a BSAA squad in Lanxiang. So now all our heroes are in China, and this is where we go back to Jake and Sherry. The two have been prisoners in Neo Umbrella's China facility for 6 months, but due to convenient circumstances, they both manage to find a way to escape. They break out of the facility and, pursued by Neo Umbrella's forces, make a run for it through the streets of Lanxiang. Eventually, they run into none other than Leon and Helena. A conversation between the two pairs leads to several revelations. Sherry tells Leon that Derek Simmons is her boss, but Leon informs her that this whole mess has been caused by Simmons. Sherry and Leon have a history, of course. He saved her life back in Raccoon City after all, so naturally, she trusts him. She tells Leon and Helena where to find Simmons, and promises to meet up with him at the rendezvous point. As Leon and Helena are making their way to the location, they chance across Ada Wong, whose personal mission to destroy the project that led to the creation of her clone and to take Carla Radamez out of the equation has brought her to China as well. Leon and Helena try to communicate with her, but the situation goes quickly out of control. For starters, this isn't the real Ada after all, it's her clone, Carla. On top of that, Chris, as it turns out, has fully recovered his memories at this point, and he's on full tilt. He's single-mindedly pursuing Ada, unaware that it was actually Carla who killed his team. And just as Leon and Helena are trying to get information out of Carla, Chris and Piers arrive on the scene as well. Things quickly get heated. Chris is determined to kill the woman he thinks is Ada, but Leon won't have it. He tells Chris that it's not her, but Simmons who is responsible for everything that's going on, and soon enough, the two of them are pointing their guns at each other. In this confusion, Carla manages to slip past them and escape. Leon manages to talk Chris down, and the two pairs part ways once again. Leon and Helena go after Simmons, while Chris and Piers run after Carla. Let's go ahead and stick with Leon and Helena for now. They arrive at Simmons' location around the same time that Sherry and Jake do, and here, Simmons openly admits that he was responsible for everything that's happened, but that he did it in the name of global stability, which translates to ensuring that his shadow organization, the Family, retains its dominance and wealth. The situation quickly turns violent, as Simmons, now infected with the C virus, transforms into a giant BOW, which looks an awful lot like a T-Rex because that's just the sort of game that Resident Evil 6 is. Leon and Helena take him on, while Jake and Sherry make their escape. The latter pair, however, is quickly overpowered by several infected monstrosities, and once again, they are taken captive. While this is going on, Chris and Piers have been chasing after Carla through the streets of China. They eventually corner her aboard an aircraft carrier, where Carla, who Chris and Piers still think is Ada, reveals her plan. She plans to fire a missile loaded with the C virus over Lanxiang to become a global outbreak of the virus, recreating the Raccoon City incident, but on a much larger scale, since from here, the virus will spread all over the world. As it turns out, Carla is acting against Simmons as well. Tortured by the experiments he did on her to turn her into an Ada Wong clone, her personality has been resurfacing over time, and she intends to use the C virus as a global weapon to destroy everything that Simmons and the Family have worked for. Just as she is about to launch the missile, however, a chopper arrives on the scene, from where a sniper working for the Family shoots Carla through the chest. Injured, she falls off the aircraft carrier to her apparent death. Chris and Piers are relieved the missile strike didn't go through, but their relief is short-lived. Carla, as it turns out, was one step ahead again. The missile reactivates and launches, explodes in the air, and envelops the city in a C virus gas. By this time, Leon and Helena have managed to defeat the T-Rex known as Simmons, apparently killing him. But not really, of course, and more on this in a bit. Soon afterward, they are contacted by Chris, who informs them of the missile strike, telling them to evacuate the city immediately. Leon, however, realizes that there's still a way out of this mess. Jake carries C-virus antibodies, which can be used to make a vaccine. He tells Chris that Jake and Sherry have been taken captive and need to be rescued, since Jake is the key to humanity's survival. Chris and Piers agree to head to Neo Umbrella's undersea facility for the rescue operation, while Leon and Helena try to flee from the city. As they're doing so, they are attacked once again by Simmons, who is not dead after all, and has mutated even further. During their desperate fight against him, they are aided by Ada Wong, and are finally able to kill him for good. Ada mysteriously vanishes from the scene immediately afterward, while Leon and Helena board a chopper and flee from the city. Ada meanwhile manages to find all of Carla's research and destroys it completely before leaving the city for her next mysterious assignment as well. Which means 2 of the 4 campaigns still need wrapping up, but we're almost there. Chris and Piers arrive at the undersea Neo Umbrella facility and manage to find Jake and Sherry. Chris and Jake almost come to blows when the former reveals that he was the one who killed Albert Wesker, but that's just RE6 being dramatic for no reason again. The dramatic confrontation is interrupted when they are attacked by a massive C-virus-infected BOW called House. House, as it turns out, was created by Carla Radamez as her ultimate weapon, and has the ability to spread the C-virus by itself. If it manages to make it to the surface, the situation will get a whole lot worse. Chris and Piers engage House in a fight, while Jake and Sherry make a run for it. House proves to be too much for them to handle though. The BOW mortally wounds Piers, while Chris also sustains serious injuries. But just as the 2 of them are on the verge of being killed, in a final act of desperation, Piers injects himself with the C-virus. He undergoes a deadly transformation, and using his newfound powers, manages to subdue House. Knowing that he's not going to stick around for much longer, he forces Chris into an escape pod, and as Chris leaves the facility, he helplessly watches on as Piers sacrifices himself, destroying the facility in a final act of heroism. Meanwhile, Jake and Sherry are stopped by none other than Ustanak. The 2 of them take the BOW on in a final, grueling fight, but ultimately they are able to finally kill it for good, before escaping from the facility. Jake hands Sherry a sample of his blood and heads off on his own. Meanwhile, a vaccine is made from his blood and used to slowly curb the C-virus threat completely. And that's it. That's the messy, unnecessary, and not really all that interesting story of Resident Evil 6. From a cheap Nemesis knockoff to Albert Wesker's illegitimate son suddenly emerging from nowhere. From an Ada Wong clone to a terrible villain who at one point turns into a dinosaur. From a super agent Sherry Birkin to a Chris Redfield who has amnesia for like a minute, RE6's story was a complete and utter mess. Thankfully, if you've watched this video, at least you no longer have to play or replay the game, so that's something. So, what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead and share them in the comments below. And if you liked this video, please subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. We upload every day and would really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.